Often we don't have adults who are able to sit with us and help us validate what's happened, hear about our experience, talk it through, give it words, give it movement. So how is it feeling in my body? When that dynamic is playing out, is it feeling good, or am I feeling like I want to throw up?
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Next Level University. We have a very, very, very special guest today. She is a licensed clinical psychotherapist, counselor, and energetic healer, the founder of an amazing Instagram page, Psychotherapy Central, the president of the International Energetic Healing Association, and she also has a master's degree in applied psychotherapy and counseling, the one and only Jennifer Nurick. Jennifer, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me here and for being with in this really good high energy vibe. I can feel you too. So great to be here.
We're grateful to have you, and for the listeners, they don't know that this is the start to your day, so we want to start your day right. So let's get right into it, Jennifer. One of the things you talk about often is being a cycle breaker. That's one of the things that you talk about. What is a cycle breaker, and why is it so valuable to identify and work as one?
So for me, it's really about mostly when we've grown up in our family of origin and there is stuff going on there that we have this inner knowing that this is not the way that I want to be in the world. And usually we become quite aware of cycles that are going on in our family, and then we start to become aware of cycles that we don't want to repeat in our own life, but we find ourselves behaving in the same way or having the same experiences that we had in our childhood. And so I find that it happens for people around kind of often from about 20s, where they suddenly, it's almost like people describe it to me like coming out of a fog and suddenly realizing, oh my God, I'm dating my father, or I'm working with a boss who is just like my mother. And they have kind of a bit of an internal revelation of, oh my goodness, this isn't what I want for myself. How do I change it?
I had that experience exactly in my early 20s about a cycle that I noticed. I guess one of the questions that I have written down is most common misunderstandings. This is a go-to question that I have for anyone who I consider an expert in a particular area. When it comes to cycle breaking, what do you believe is the most common misconception that may be holding Kevin, myself, or the listeners back? Like what is it that people misbelieve or misunderstand, or a mistruth? What do you think is that thing that you find constantly as a misunderstanding?
I don't know if this is a misunderstanding, but the biggest thing that holds people back usually is fear around breaking cycles. So it's kind of that fear of who am I, how do I move out of it? But it's also kind of that fear of, am I going to be rejected? Am I going to be shamed for being different to what I've known? Am I betraying what I've always known? So I find that fear it's not really a misconception. It's more of that's the biggest block I see. So it's fear. It's kind of this pull dynamic. It's like, I really want to change, but there's also often a strong fear.
And you think the fear, so a cycle is sort of like a conditioning from your past, right? Something that you modeled subconsciously that you didn't realize you were modeling. It can be a certain behavior, a certain thought pattern, that kind of thing. Yeah. And you said that fear is the biggest bottleneck. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's also, it can also be a pattern that's becomes comfortable. So although it's really uncomfortable and we knowingly in our head don't like it, it's also, there's a tendency to move into those relationships because on some level there's a comfort in it. So let's say I've had a really avoidant mother. So I really haven't been attuned to, she's been very avoidant. And I knowingly, I don't like that. I want something different. But then I go out into the world and I start dating somebody who's really similar to that pattern. And because there is kind of a comfort in it, my psyche knows that style. And so there's something kind of comfortable about it.
Gotcha. So we tend to be drawn to it.
Yeah.
Without knowing it.
How do you recognize if it's toxic, Jennifer? Because if it's, and again, we actually talked about this in a couple interviews ago. We were talking about, is your normal? How do you know if your normal is normal? So how do you recognize if it's toxic or if it's just common for you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that happens when we start to see other ways of being. And that can happen in, just visiting friends' houses or being inside other people's relationships or starting to date somebody who's got a totally different relational style to the one you grew up with. So there's lots of different ways that you can start to work it out. Also, how is it feeling in my body? So in the work that I do, I reference the body a lot. We do a lot of somatic work. So how is it feeling in my body? When that dynamic is playing out, is it feeling good, or am I feeling like I want to throw up? Like, how's it feeling in me? But we can get disconnected from those feelings and that inner knowing. And so sometimes just seeing what's going on around us and then referencing it back, well, is that happening for me? And why is that not happening? Yeah.
That really highlighted something for me when you said going to other people's houses. Like that definitely broke something free for me. I remember when I was a kid, I used to love to go to other people's houses because we could play really loud and do whatever we wanted. And at my house, it wasn't like that. And I think that conditioned me to like that certain environment. So that's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, it was the same for me. When I was a child, we did certain things in certain ways. And I remember spending a lot of time at friends' houses, and it was really different. And I remember being young and thinking, I want my family, when I create a family, to be more like that. And how do I start to move into that? So it's almost kind of like getting different role models, which can happen anywhere. It could be a counselor, it could be a teacher. But I definitely found it in that family environment. Yeah.
Jennifer, if you'd be willing, the cycle that I noticed and identified in my early 20s was drinking. It involved drinking, and that's a cycle that I've broken. I'm now sober. But if you're willing to share with our listeners or with Kevin and I, what's a cycle that you identified and then worked on, breaking and then kind of reshaping your new identity?
It's a good question. So I grew up with a lot of don't be seen, be quiet, it's dangerous to be seen. And that came a lot through my family trauma. And so obviously my parents' experience was it's dangerous to be seen, it's dangerous to be heard. So I'm breaking a cycle just speaking to you, just being here. There was a lot of, it's dangerous to stand up. It's dangerous to have an opinion, let alone voice that opinion. I've done a lot of work on public speaking, on being seen. And I've done it in lots of different ways, lots of sort of energetic modalities, lots of psychotherapeutic modalities. Like I've really explored a lot of different things, which has been awesome because I'm totally into the personal development space. So that's a huge one for me. I was the first person in my family to go to university. I grew up on in housing commission in the UK. I went to sleep with, shouting going on next door. There was a lot of drug use going on around me. I really, I got myself I got a scholarship to go into a private school when I was 13. So a lot of cycles that I broke. Yeah, a lot.
Well, that's huge. So you talk about inner child, you talk about trauma a lot.
Yeah.
When it comes to the inner child, and my girlfriend does a lot of this work, she talks about somatic expression all the time. She talks about breaking cycles constantly. I noticed in your bio, it says conscious parent, and I literally screenshot it and I said, I can't wait to interview her. And I screenshotted a couple of the breaking the cycle stuff that you do on your Instagram. Because she's big into that. But so I've learned a lot about this, and we call little Alan, that's like a thing, like little Alan is upset right now, or little Alan is needy right now, or whatever it is. What can our listeners understand about their inner child? And, obviously we have these different parts of ourselves. One of our parts is that inner child. Can you explain how you have navigated your inner child and sort of what that is for people who haven't maybe heard that before?
Yeah. So for me, the inner child work has been some of the most effective work that I've done in my own psyche. And we all have different parts, and it can be, Jen, do you want to go out tomorrow night? And part of me might be like, yeah, I'd love to get dressed up and go out, and that'll be really fun. And then another part of me is, I'm already in my pajamas. I just want to stay at home. No, I don't want to go out. And so it's natural to have different parts of us that are saying different things. One part's like, let's get up at 7 a.m. and meditate. Another part's like, no, let's stay in bed. I'm exhausted. So it's natural we have these different parts. And when they have a lot of energy in them, so especially if they've come about through intense experiences, so if there's been trauma and it hasn't been able to be processed, and remember that as children, a lot of strong energy, it can't get processed because we don't often, and not for everybody, but often we don't have adults who are able to sit with us and help us validate what's happened, hear about our experience, talk it through, give it words, give it movement. Most of us don't have those adults around. I know that I didn't as a kid. And so they can kind of get stuck as parts of self that might be shouting, not safe, not safe, in a situation where, logically as an adult, we might think, well, I'm safe in this situation. But there's a part of us shouting really loudly, not safe, not safe, not safe. Yeah. And so we can develop these kinds of parts of self. Now, for me, inner child is a very special and sacred part of self because it contains all of the memories and experiences of our childhood, so positive and negative. And in the positive expression, so much joy and movement and a sense of freedom and energy and vitality for life. So that's kind of the gift of the inner child. And there can also be a lot of fear and a lot of reticence and sort of hangovers from our childhood that are held in the inner child. So when I first started to do this work, I was struggling with my in-laws. And look, I'm good friends with my in-laws now, so I can talk about them on this podcast and they can listen to it and they, we hug each other and it's all good.
I just sent it to them. I'm kidding.
He's in America at the moment, but he's coming back to stay with us when he gets back. So I was struggling with my in-laws and my inner child. I remember before I went into their house, some evenings we would go for dinner and my inner child would throw the hugest tantrum. And it would sound like in my own head, well, I don't want to. They're mean people, they're not being nice. I don't want to. And that was around the time that I'd really started to engage with the inner child work because I was seeing patterns repeating from my own family of origin were starting to be repeated in the family that I was wanted to marry into, right? So I remember sitting with her in the car with my inner child, so little Jan, and I really heard her, I hear what you're saying. You're right. In some ways, they're being really mean and it's not okay. And I'm really here for you. And I'm not going to force you to go. If you really don't want to go, we'll go home and I'll sit with you here for as long as you need. And I would sit with her and I'd say, what do you need? And she might say, I really need you to hug me and tell me it's going to be okay. Okay, let's do that. So I kind of hold her. And for me, there's a spot kind of on my body. It's a somatic spot up here on my chest where when I hold there, I feel her. There's like a connection with her. And then there's a sigh, which is a somatic release, right? Okay, you're here and you've heard me and you hear what I'm saying about these people. And then I might say to her, is that reminding you a little bit of your parents? And she might say, it is a bit. It's reminding me of them. And I feel a bit rejected and hurt. And I'm a nice person. So why are they doing this? And I'm holding her. I hear that. I really hear that. And I'm going to have boundaries in place to protect you. I'm not just going to let anything happen in this situation. And if you don't feel up to it tonight, then I'll take you home. We'll just get a taxi home. It's okay. A sigh. Yeah, I feel really protected by you now. So she's talking to me there. Good. I'm glad that you're feeling me. I've so got you in this. I know this is hard and I'm here for you. I've really got you. Another sigh. Yeah, okay, I feel that you've got me. So we'll just sit here now and wait until you're ready to go in. So my body feels calm now. There's been a bit of sighing, a bit of somatic shifting going on. I've really validated how she's feeling. I've given her other options. I'm not forcing her into something she doesn't want to do. And that's what it sounds, looks, feels like.
How long did it take you to get to that place where you were able to work through the entire, because obviously first it's self-discovery and exploration into that. How long did it take you to really get in tune with your inner child?
Hey guys, my name is Jacob Valdellon, and I just finished next level group coaching. When I joined, I wasn't sure what I was walking into. But during the entire course and the program, I figured out it's not something that I wanted to do, it's something I needed to do. They helped set me on the right path with learning how to do PPTs, peak performance tracking, and every 2 weeks I was gaining new awarenesses and getting a lot more happier, first of all, in my health, wealth, and love, but also winning more practically and tactically in business. So if you're looking to upgrade your life and get to that next level, definitely sign up for that group coaching.
The first time I met my inner child, I was in a group setting, and I was doing an inner child course. And I thought I was going to meet like a cute 6-year-old with like pigtails or something. My inner child was about 13 years old, smoking a cigarette with a cigarette holder. And I'll just bracket that with, I've never been a smoker. And she was wearing knee-high boots. She was wearing a really short skirt. So this was everything that I would not have been allowed to do as a teenager, right? And it was my total teenage rebellious part had come forward. And so it was just not what I was expecting at all, which kind of helped me know that it was real, because I thought, well, if I was making this up, I would have made up a cute 6-year-old who was maybe a bit sad. But mine wasn't like that at all. She was not having a bar of me. She was just like, you've not spoken to me. You've just left me out in the cold. I am so not interested in you. So it took me a little while. So I had a guided meditation that I used. And I have this in a course that I have online. I'll talk about it at the end. But I had a meditation that I used to guide me into connecting with her. And I did it daily for a while. And so I have quite strong imagery and sort of that mental capacity to imagine. And it can come forward in different ways for different people. So some people might have a very strong image of themselves. And sometimes they'll say, Jen, I'm just imagining a photograph of me at about 3, and she's kind of coming out through the photograph. That's totally fine. It's kind of whatever's your hook or I call it a gateway in. Whatever's your gateway in is totally fine. But for me, it was quite easy to kind of get a imagining of myself. And I think it was from a photograph, not the first image, but later on, I would have more of an image of her in this certain blue dress that I don't remember, but I have a photograph of me in it. And then it's starting to form a relationship, and I'm here as the functional adult and the loving parent. So I have the opportunity to build my capacity as a loving parent to myself. So it's a very deep form of self-love. And when we talk about self-love and we're talking about having a bath or, making yourself a hot chocolate, this is a very different kind of self-love, because we're accessing often a part of us that holds complexity and sometimes holds trauma and wounding, and we're learning how to attend to that part. And as we do this work, that part will often say things that we're not not in our head at all. It's not in our cognitive mind. It's kind of the inner child will say something really, like I wasn't expecting that. Okay. So for example, someone might say, do you want to go out tonight? And my immediate response might be, yeah, let's go out. That'll be fun. And then as I start to get ready, I might start to feel like, I'm actually not too sure that I really feel like this. And then I might check in with my child. How do you feel about going out tonight? And she might have her hands on her hips immediately. No, you promised me yesterday that if we did all that hard work yesterday, that we would rest tonight. And going out is not resting. And then I'll be, I did say that. And actually, I'm an introvert, and I know that if I spend a whole day being out in the world and doing, that actually I need to counterbalance that with rest. And so my inner child is caring for me in that way. She's saying, hey, we were extroverted a lot yesterday. And so today is an inward day, and going out will take a lot of energy for us. So can we just rethink that? And then it will be a discussion between me and her. What feels right? Is it go out but come home at 9? Or is it actually not go out at all and go into a discussion? Now, sometimes the inner child might say, I'm feeling rubbish and I want to eat a whole tub of ice cream. Now, that's where the loving inner parent comes in. And just like if you were babysitting, if you're not a parent, just like if you're babysitting and the child said, I want to have that whole tub of ice cream, you would say, okay, I hear that there's part of you that wants to eat the whole tub of ice cream. And how that goes with my child is, I hear that, and that might, how many scoops usually before you start to feel ill? And then she looks kind of sheepish. 2, maximum of 2 when you start to feel queasy. Yeah, okay, so a whole tub of ice cream actually isn't going to make us feel good. Is there anything that you might need before we think about the ice cream? And then straight away she'll say, yeah, I really need a hug, and I need you to tell me it's going to be okay. So I'll give her a hug. Again, a somatic release. Okay. And I let her know that it's going to be okay. I might talk her through what she's worried about or what's causing the anxiety. And at the end of that process, how are you feeling about the ice cream now? She'll say, yeah, okay, I don't need a whole tub of ice cream now. And then I might say, okay, how would some chamomile tea be? Or a hot chocolate? She'll say, yeah, okay, and a movie. Okay, and a movie.
I'll tell you this, Jennifer, Pajama Kev always wins. Pajama Kev always wins. Alan knows that. Always.
He's probably winning right now, honestly.
Nope. I have sweatpants on. Thank you.
Okay.
Jennifer, one of the things that I think, and that was very deep, and I love that. I love that we're able to go there to the depths of that understanding. For somebody out there who looks back, whether it's into their childhood or an earlier time in their life, and they feel shame and guilt. This is something I saw that you posted about. Can you differentiate between shame and guilt? And how do you get out of those cycles when you're struggling to forgive yourself at a lower awareness, when you didn't know the repercussions of what you were doing? Can you just take people through that kind of cycle?
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys know the work of Brené Brown. You heard of Brené Brown? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So she's an amazing shame researcher. So anyone who's working with shame, I highly recommend all of her work, books, podcasts. So the difference between shame and guilt is guilt says, I did something bad. I did something that I regret. And shame says, I am something bad. I am innately unlovable. Yeah. So it's a very different flavor. When we're saying, I did something I regret, then there's agency. Okay, well, I can change that because I can apologize. I can move forward with that in different ways. When I am something bad, that's more of a core programming. And usually that's come out of our childhood. And if not of our family of origin, then it can come out of some intense experiences, maybe with bullying or outside of school. Yeah. So it's not always family of origin. It can be that intense traumas happened in different areas. And we're just working with a slightly different, it's just a different way of tackling it. So when we're working with shame, it's more of core self and core identity. So if you're working deeply with shame, I would highly recommend that you do that work with a therapist, because you're having a different relational experience when you're working with a therapist. And we're able together to touch into those deep, and it's that like, it's so kind of dark and icky, and we've often pushed it down so much and often put defenses over the top of it. And it can look like, because I feel shame, I will have extra bravado in the world, or I will overachieve to escape from this sense of shame. And it can propel forward behaviors that can become out of balance in order to get away from or hide the shame that's hiding. So when we reach a place and an environment, a time and a container where we can kind of turn around and face that shame, and start to work with that, and that concept, that energy can start to subside, And then whatever's happening over here to counterbalance can also start to subside, and there can become a much greater sense of balance inside of self, but also in how we move forward in the world. Do you have any experience with any of that, or the parenting work?
Or? So Alan and I aren't parents yet. I have cats, and Alan has a puppy. But I think one of the reasons we love talking about this is because we're either going through it or we've gone through our own versions of this, and we try to be as vulnerable as possible talking about it, because you might never know. Like us seeing you, Jennifer, we might assume you have it all figured out and you're so amazing at all this, but if you are, and you are amazing, but if you are, part of it is because you've had to go through it and learn and evolve. I just want to respect your time, Jennifer. We only have a couple minutes. I want to make sure that you can talk about your courses, and your social media is amazing. I went all the way back to your first couple posts and watched your growth. It's because you add so much value. So talk to the people about you.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
I mean, I do what I love. I'm so blessed. I feel like it is just such a blessing that I do what I love, and I have the opportunity to share the things that I've learned and the things that have worked for me. And there is so much out there that works. And I just think, and I always say this to my clients and people I work with, at one point you might be pulled into acupuncture and you might do a lot of work with acupuncture. And another time you come over and you do a lot of coaching work. And another time you come over and do a lot of sort of deep therapy work or other kind of healing work. And I always say kind of just go wherever you're guided and just pause there for as long as you need, and then move into the next part. And that's really been my own journey. And then there's certain things which I've been using for the last 17 years. And for me, they just, those are the things that work. And so I tend to find that the people who resonate with those particular flavors, they're the people who come to work with me. So I created an inner child course, which is a beautiful introduction to inner child work. And then an inner child advanced, where you have the opportunity to sort of visit different developmental stages where the inner child is and do some of that work. And then if you want to go deeper with that, I have the relationship cycle breaker course. Now that's really for people who have seen those cycles showing up in their relationships and want to start breaking some deeper cycles. So it's partly videoed material and huge workbooks that course has. And we do group coaching through those sessions. So again, it very much gives you the ingredients of how to shift your attachment styles and to work with intergenerational traumas that have been showing up. And how deep people go with it, it's like any kind of coaching or personal development work, right? However deep you choose to go with it is what you get out of it. But the ingredients, it's all there, and people have really big shifts. I've had people, reconnecting with family members who they haven't spoken to in 20 years. I've had people enter into completely different relationships that they had no idea that they could experience. They're just like, I can't believe what's happened. My pattern's been the X and now I'm in Y, and I feel like a whole other person. So yeah. And so that's the opportunity. And I guess I'm also aware of just how much is out there and how good so much of it is,
Well, yeah. We'll link all of your stuff in the show notes so people can find it. And I challenge everybody to go follow Jennifer. That'll be in the show notes as well. It's awesome. So much value. And the stuff makes you think too. It's not just like you scroll through it. Like I read the captions, and I'm sure Alan did as well. Alan, you want to say something? I can feel it.
Yeah, you can. Thank you. So the very last question, I know we got to go. We got a minute and a half before we're at the 30 mark. Minute and 20 seconds, actually. I had this question I wanted to ask you because you mentioned self-improvement.
Yeah.
Being a psychotherapist, a clinician, doing this work for 17 years, inner child work, what do you believe is the if you had to try, and of course it's not one thing, but if you had to boil it down to one thing, what do you think is holding people back from their own self-improvement more than maybe anything else? What's the most common that you've found that is just like a kink in the hose of their own self-improvement, so to speak?
Yeah, there's so many things kind of popping up into my head. It's kind of, fear, self-doubt, a clear pathway, I think, as well. Sometimes there can be, I think, so much out there. People kind of go, well, where do I start? What's the right path for me? And in answer to that, I would kind of say, just choose something or someone that feels resonant and go for that for a little while and see how that lands. So I guess what's the kink in their own hose? Yeah, I guess fear. So, fear, not having and maybe even not having a role, not seeing anybody around who's done that kind of work before. So a sense of, like, often I see a lot of people who are kind of say, I don't know anyone who does any of this kind of work, and they feel quite kind of isolated in it. So often it can be a relief stepping into some kind of community or sense of community like you offer at the Next Level University, and like people receive in the Cycle Breaker, kind of that there are people doing this kind of work, and it can almost be like learning a new language, right? That there's sort of the language of inner child, the language of reparenting. It's a whole other language to learn.
Well, we're grateful that you joined us in our community, and I'm sure our community is grateful as well. And this was, I can't believe how fast it went by. I literally looked at the clock and I was like, oh my goodness. We'll definitely reach out in the future. We'll definitely have you back on, and I know our listeners are going to love this. Jennifer, thank you so very much for coming on, and we will talk to you very, very soon, I hope.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this conversation. Thank you.
You as well. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Appreciate you.